The following is a production of WLA Television Worth Watching.
Greater New Orleans on LAE is brought to you by the Historic New Orleans Collection, bringing history to life, and by Entergy. Entergy, the power of people. Good evening, I'm Tom Bagwill, and welcome to Greater New Orleans on LAE, more than television. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and the massive flooding that occurred in the New Orleans area, a number of organizations came into existence with the goal of trying to prevent such a disaster from ever occurring again. One organization in particular has risen to the top in terms of visibility, accomplishments, and raising awareness of the causes of the problem. That organization is Levees.org, and here to talk about it with us this evening is the organization's founder, Sandy Rosenthal. Well, thank you for being with us on the program.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Before we get into the specifics about Levees.org, tell us how it got started and a little more about yourself personally, how you got involved in all of this.
Well, it arose out of an argument, a rather heated argument, I might add, with a gentleman from Alexandria. I was trying to explain to him that had our levees held like they were supposed to, that we just would have had some wet ankles, and he told me, no, New Orleans flooded because Katrina was such a bad storm and because we're below sea level, and that I deserved what happened to me. And I realized that day something had to be done.
Okay. And what was it that had to be done? I'm sure you didn't say, I've got to start an organization called Levees.org. How did you get from that point to what ended up being what you have now?
Well, believe it or not, I felt like somebody had to explain to people that live outside of New Orleans what really happened and what the truth is about this flooding. Because I realized this was late October. This was Halloween Day, 2005. It's been months after the flooding. And I thought, well, what can we do? And I thought, let's use the web and let's get the word out. And I admit it sounds naive. I feel naive now, except it worked.
I know who Sandy Rosenthal is now, but who was Sandy Rosenthal before Hurricane Katrina?
I had a very nice life that I wasn't working on levees 24/7. Before the flooding, I played a lot of tennis. I was a part-time fitness instructor. I had a part-time job in marketing. I used to work about 20 hours a week, and I did a lot of community work. I volunteered in the public schools for about 10 years, fitness and nutrition. But I gave all that up to work for Levees.org.
You lived here. At what point did you decide that you... and what happened to your home itself? Was it your personal story and what happened to you and your family that really kind of got you off the ball?
Well, I was one of the lucky ones. My home didn't flood, my son's school didn't flood, and my husband's business wasn't affected by the flooding. The reason I started Levees.org because of the injustice of all these people in New Orleans who have lost everything. Some of them have lost family members, and we're being blamed for the flooding. When it absolutely wasn't our fault, and I was just so angered and so outraged by that was enough to spur me to action. Oh, by the way, I tried to find another organization that was already doing this work, and there wasn't one. And at the end of the day, I realized, well, I guess I'm going to have to do it.
Did you leave town? And if you did, when you came back, you saw your home and you were okay. But did you leave town? And if you did, when you came back, what did you see elsewhere?
Sure. We evacuated. My husband told me to evacuate for 3 weeks, and he was right. That was a smart thing to do. And we evacuated to Lafayette, and that's where we found we found a school for my son. He was 15 years old at the time, and that's where we stayed for 3 months so that he could finish his first semester of high school. Stanford, by the way, was the webmaster for the organization. And it's really he and I that started Levees.org. I did the text, and he was the webmaster.
Okay. Take me back to the point again of going from an idea to getting the idea started, getting it on the web, formulating the name, and exactly what the mission of your organization was going to be, other than to try to get over this anger.
Sure. The mission is education about why New Orleans flooded, because until the American people understand that the flooding of New Orleans was a federal responsibility, they'll never see rebuilding as a federal duty. And we decided that we just needed to get the facts out to the people of America. And my son offered to do a website, and then I thought, well, we're going to need more than a website, and me and my son, and I thought, we need members. We need to have a membership. And I thought, well, how am I going to do that? And then I said, I have an idea. I'll do a petition. We'll do a petition to President Bush asking him to keep good on his promise that he made in Jackson Square to rebuild New Orleans bigger and stronger. Well, I now know that's not how to get things done. If you want something done, you don't petition the president. But I was naive, as I said at the time. But what it did do is we got 200 people overnight signed our petition, and now we have a membership. We have a website, we have a mission, we have membership, we must be somebody.
Getting any petition signed can be difficult, even over, we need to put a tree here in the middle of our neighborhood. Was there some reluctance for people to sign it first?
No. When we launched our website and the petition on December 2nd, 2005, and we sent it out to our family and friends and asked them to sign the petition and forward it to their family and friends, and again, overnight we have 200 signatures, and of course now we have 25,000.
Is this now I'm assuming it started as a voluntary position. Is it now a paid position for you?
No, it's still a volunteer position. And our organization, I want to point out, is a true grassroots group in that we accept no funding from stakeholder groups or industries. All of the things we do are funded out of the pockets of the supporters.
It started with you. Mm-hmm. How many people now work for levees.org, and what roles do they play?
Okay. I would say people actually carrying the heavy load, doing the work for levees.org, I would say that's about 7 or 8 people, okay, at various times. Sometimes they work more than others. For example, our legislative liaison right now, who wrote the 829 investigation legislation, which we'll probably talk about later, he's currently in Europe, and so he's not doing anything right now. But we, at various times, 5 or 6 people, and a lot of the people that did a lot of work did it on a pro bono basis. A lot of people believed in what we were doing.
What about now?
What about now?
As far as staffers who might be getting paid.
Sure. Well, there are no paid staffers. Again, everybody working for levees.org is a volunteer, and we have 5 board members, and we have about 20 advisors who do a good bit of work for us.
As you say, I am somebody as an organization, and you've got the signatures to prove it. But has there been any discussion about, to move you further, that there might have to be a full-time staff or some semblance of a paid staff with people who aren't going to Europe? Has it even been discussed?
As a matter of fact, it has been discussed, because if we became a 501c3 status organization, we could accept grants. If we can accept grants, we can hire staff and maybe an office with lamps and do those things. So yes, there are discussions. It's just going to be a matter of, is it needed? And I want to point out, the goal of levees.org wasn't making it as big as possible. The goal of levees.org was the mission. If the goal was having a big staff and an office, we would have done things very different. But we've been driven to the mission of levees.org, which is why New Orleans flooded. And we've made huge strides, which I'd be happy to talk about later. But I just wanted to explain why we're not, in an ivory tower somewhere.
And isn't there a part of you that loves to say no one's paid?
Yes, there is.
Rather than 90% of our incoming money goes to the actual, whereas you can say, every penny that comes to us is spent not on personnel,
exactly,
but on mission.
You're right. James Carville, I met with him recently, told me, and I agree with him, that if you want something done, you pay your people. You don't use volunteers. And I agree with him, because he's right about that. But he told me, he said, what y'all have done with levees.org is amazing. So, but that said, the way we did it is we utilized the advice of volunteers. If volunteers, highly talented volunteers, come to you and offer you their expertise, and if you use their advice, they'll come back. And they'll keep coming back, because that's really all the thanks they wanted.
Issues like flood protection, levee construction, and related areas would appear to require at least a basic knowledge of disciplines like engineering, hydrology, geology, and the like. You said you were a tennis player. Did you have any of these backgrounds going into this?
My entire life prepared me for this day. Little things like I took speech therapy 10 years ago, which really gave me confidence with things like what I'm doing right now. As a fitness instructor, I was always out in front of an entire group of people, 50 people at a time. didn't bother me to be at the front of the room and for people to be watching.
Had to be a motivator. Right.
I've worked in volunteer work. I could go on and on how this work has prepared me. But you're right, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a lawyer. But I can read and I can see. And those are the things I use to lead the organization. And probably the second most important individual, besides my son, the webmaster, I would have to say would be H.J. Bosworth, Jr., who worked with me and provided his expertise as a civil engineer.
How important was it, though, and is it for you to be versed on these topics? So, no, you're not a geologist, no, you're not a hydrologist, no, you're not an engineer, but you can have conversations with these people.
Believe it or not, I really didn't have to learn engineering technology beyond the things that you know. You know the difference now between an eye wall and a T-wall, but I really didn't have to know more than that. What I needed to do was take this complex information, repackage it, and disseminate it in a way that people could understand.
Okay. You said the storm was not to blame. Someone else was.
Correct.
Who was to blame?
Correct. The same with BP oil disaster. What was to blame was lax engineering and lack of federal oversight. Those were the two things that created both of these disasters. To blame Katrina for the flooding of New Orleans, that would be like blaming traffic for the I-35 bridge in Minneapolis that broke a couple of years ago. The bridge was supposed to transport traffic. The hurricane protection was supposed to prevent us from hurricane storm surge. So you can't blame Katrina. And that is probably our #1 message that we're trying to convey. And you'd be surprised how many people, even right here in this town, don't quite understand that yet. But what you call something is important.
Specifically, the Army Corps of Engineers, is that if you have to put the finger somewhere, you mentioned federal government, federal oversight, is it the Army Corps of Engineers?
Well, I'm going to quote law right now. By law, in the Flood Control Act of 1965, the responsibility for the design and the construction of our flood protection belongs to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Our organization was not founded to disseminate that piece of information, but in giving out the truth and in response to questions like you just said, I've had to quote the law.
As a reporter, I think I was actually part of one of these stories where all these different groups would get together, Sewage and Water Board, Army Corps of Engineers, Levee Board, and they do the annual inspection of the levees. And as we all know now, it turned out to be about a 15-minute news conference or so, and they'd walk along for a while, and then all go have lunch and talk about how great things are. Who was around before that? Obviously, it wasn't the media, and I think the media has done a much better job since then. But who was watching over to make sure?
Who was watching the inspectors?
Yes.
Well, I do want to point out that
who should have been watching them? Who was and who should have been?
We as citizens assumed that if the federal government's building our levees and if they're being inspected by all these organizations, we had no reason to assume these inspections weren't good inspections. But I do want to point out that even if they'd spent 3 months eyeballing every speck of levee that we had, 350 miles of levees, they couldn't have seen engineering failures, engineering mistakes underground. They couldn't have seen design flaws underground. So my question to you is, I'm not sure what they're supposed to see, and anything they could see, the lawnmowers would have seen it. They're looking for breaks in the levees and burrows, hogs digging holes in them. So my point is, those inspections wouldn't have generated much more than they did. Or may not have. I shouldn't say will. May not have.
You said by law the levees are supposed to now. The flood control system is supposed to be inspected on an annual basis. Is that right?
The law has not changed. The inspections are done by 3 organizations: the Corps of Engineers, the Levee Board, and the Sewage and Water Board. It's a effort, and it's my understanding that they're expecting the Levee Boards more often. But again, I'm not sure what they're supposed to see without sonar equipment.
Do you know if it's happening? And is it one of your missions to make sure that it's happening?
And the answer is I don't know if it's going on. I've heard, my fingers are on the pulse of a lot of this. I've heard that they're doing more thorough inspections, but again, I'm not aware that they've invested in equipment to do these inspections. As you know, the Orleans Levee Board was stripped of all its assets, so I don't know where the money's going to come from.
But it's not your mission. This is not one of the things you're
The mission of our organization is education on why New Orleans flooded again, because until the people understand why it flooded, I'm not sure why they would see the rebuilding make much sense.
You and the Levees.org organization have been calling for an 829 commission to be commissioned by Congress that would investigate the Katrina disaster. Are you getting closer to that objective, or frankly, do you see it slipping away?
Okay, in answer to that, 84 days after the BP oil disaster, President Obama called for an independent investigation of the failure to find out what happened, make sure it never happens again. It has been 5 years. We still have not gotten an independent investigation of the levee failures, even though over 1,600 people died, and even though a major city went underwater. Why we didn't get it is something I don't understand, but we're still going to push for it. And do I think we're still going to get it? Yes. And the reason is because of a young, very talented, smart gentleman named Garrett Graves, who is chairman of the Louisiana Coastal Protection Authority. He is sponsoring the 829 investigation. He has asked Congress to include it as part of the Water Resources Development Act of 2010 in the original language of the bill. What that means is it can't be stripped off as an amendment later. So with Garrett Graves behind it, at the moment I'm feeling quite confident it may actually happen.
Are all of our members of Congress from Louisiana on board?
Garrett Graves has told me that he believes he can get all of them on board. And I have recently sent him an email asking if there's anything that our organization can do to help him.
What has Mary Landrieu said? Is she on board, yes or no?
I don't know, because I haven't heard back from Mr. Graves. This was just announced about 2 weeks ago.
But this is something you're pushing. He's pushing for you.
So you go.
What is Mary Landrieu in favor of an 829 commission?
Let's move back to 2007. In 2007, when we first started asking for it, Mary Landrieu was the first on board who said she would sponsor it, and she did. And she drew up, she and I, and with the help of Senator Vitter, actually, wrote the language for the 829 investigation bill. It was filed with the Water Resources Development Act of 2007, but it got stripped off later. It received what she thought was partisan objection.
Has she tried to put it back in? And obviously I want to go to the other side. What about David Vitter?
Okay.
Where is he?
She did. Once it was passed, you can't get it back in again, but she actually filed it as a standalone bill in 2008, and Congressman Charlie Melanson filed it as a standalone bill in 2008, so it was filed in both the House and the Senate. But it didn't get the support that it needed to pass Congress. Remember, we have 585 members of Congress.
So are you satisfied with the support you've gotten from our elected leaders at the Washington level?
From Senator Landrieu, yes. I'm not as satisfied with Senator Vitter's office. A member of his staff did help me write the language, but in the end, he did not do enough, in our opinion, to get that bill passed.
Suppose the commission does find the Corps responsible. What tangible benefit will that have?
Well, let me back up. The point of the commission would be to find out what went wrong and to look at the decision-making that led to those failures, and then to make recommendations on making sure this never happens again. The point of the commission isn't necessarily to point blame, to point fingers or assign blame. It's to make sure that something like this never happens again. And the reason it's important, and we need it, is because levees are too important, and what happens when levees fail, too horrible for us to rely on a self-study. And that's what Congress is doing. They're relying on a self-study. They're relying on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers investigation of itself.
I notice on your website and in your emails, Levees.org has 5 or 6 chapters now all over the country. Are these other chapters behind your efforts to get an 829 commission? And what involvement do you have in these chapters? Are you running them?
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm sorry. They are all behind the 829 investigation. If you notice, they are in states with big levee issues of their own, such as Florida, California, Illinois, New York, and very soon Massachusetts is going to be joining, that had a lot of levee failure and flooding just this past winter. The role of those organizations is to help spread the word that levee failure and flooding isn't a coastal issue or even a sea level issue. It's a national issue, and all of those organizations do work to increase the membership in those states.
There was a controversy not too long ago involving Corps members attacking you and your organization through emails and public online postings. How did that end up?
Very unsatisfactory. Do you know what a whitewash means?
Yes.
Well, what happened is Senator Landrieu, to her credit, was outraged that that emails and comments coming out of the Corps of Engineers headquarters directed at my organization and other organizations as well was going on, and she asked the Justice Department to do an investigation. Excuse me, she asked the Defense Department to do an investigation. The investigation lasted about a week as far as I can tell, and in the end, the Department of Defense determined that enough had been done. Whoever sent those emails was fired. End of story. So what happened is they didn't do a full investigation. They only investigated a couple of emails, only a couple of communications that our organization proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, and then they didn't investigate the whole thing. They investigated a small portion of the complaint.
But
so
Corps
it's very,
didn't
very
deny,
disappointing.
the Corps
did not deny it.
That it happened.
No.
Did you receive a personal apology from the commander?
I did receive a personal apology from Colonel Lee, which was nice of him. But when you only address 5% of an issue, you're not very satisfied.
How would you describe the relationship you had with Colonel Al Lee? I know he felt like he had a pretty good, sometimes obviously disagreement, but he felt like it was a fairly good relationship. That was his assessment. How would you assess it?
For the past 5 years, the relationship of me and my organization to the Corps of Engineers has been, they have been treating us as citizens with an opinion, with a right to their opinion. And as far as being polite and civil to us, they've been incredibly civil, incredibly polite. I mean, I feel, totally comfortable talking to any of them. But we've been treated as people with just an interesting point of view. We have not been treated as
stakeholders who can help solve the problem.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better.
There's a new commander in place now. Have you had a chance to meet him, and what do you think?
I have met with Colonel Sinkler. I do have to say he seems like a nice fella. Certainly has a way of looking at you in the eye, and you feel like he's listening to you. On the other hand, Levees.org, the mission of Levees.org is about major problems. We were not founded to lock horns with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That may have happened over the past 5 years, but that's not our goal, and it's not our mission.
Okay. Lots of questions left, so we're going to kind of get through these fairly quickly. Sure. You went to the Netherlands with Senator Mary Landrieu. Others have been. What did you see there that is applicable here?
Sure. The first thing I noticed in Holland is their federal government, or their government, decided 50 years ago they will protect their people. And that's the big difference between them and us. Here
they put up the money for it.
Right, and they did both. But it starts up here. It starts with a commitment. You will protect your people. And the second thing I noticed is a huge difference from America, but there's no reason we can't do it, is they have an attitude of working with the water. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, it's a battle and a war with the water. And the water isn't something you could ever live with. A perfect example is our canals. We're scared of them. But in Holland, they love their canals. They put boats in them, and they live by them, and they swim in them, and they have piers out in them. It's a completely different relationship.
The Corps is in the process of building new flood control structures where the outfall canals empty into the lake. One's right around the corner from me. I'm very interested. Are these being built the right way in your estimation?
I'm sorry, there was an outfall canal being built where?
Well, the three they're going to be redoing.
They're going to be refurbishing them.
That's right.
That's absolutely necessary. I just found out about that just 2 weeks ago. Absolutely critical, absolutely necessary, and I'm very glad they're doing it.
Do you have the confidence that it is being done right, and who's making sure of that?
Okay, my confidence lies in the fact that they're under the laser microscope right now, and if they mess this up, everyone who lives here knows whose fault it is. There's no way they can blame us this time. If they fail again, there's no way they're going to blame us. We're not going to buy it, no one's going to believe it. But the reason I'm worried is because of an 80-year-old law called the Flood Control Act of 1928 that holds the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers harmless in case their levee protection fails. So what incentive is there to do it right? So let's hope that just being under the international microscope is enough.
But as you pointed out earlier, once it's done and built and we see the beautiful wall and the grass, we don't know what's underneath. Who is the supervisor that's making sure that when the private contractor hired by the Corps is doing the work, that it's being done to specs, and that those specs are up to today's standards?
Well, while the levees are being built and work's going on, there's the quality control for the contractor and quality assurance for the Corps. So that's while they're being built. But your question is after they're built.
No, while they're being built. Because after they're built, we don't, as you pointed out earlier, we don't know what's underneath.
Yeah. By law, there's supposed to be quality control and quality assurance, both the contractor and the Corps. And all we can do is hope that they're doing it. Because they sure weren't doing it last time.
Wasn't that law in place before?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Do you feel that you say that you're winning in your emails?
I do.
How do you know that you're winning?
Okay. Many, many ways, and I can give you one example. I give you many examples, but one that springs to mind is New Orleans Magazine. Instead of doing the editorials of their monthly editorial, they put up a picture of a plaque that Levee.org sponsored, explaining what happened on August 29, 2005. And if that's not a testament to what our organization is doing, I don't know what is. Another example is on a routine basis, I get phone calls from CNN, BBC, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, routinely, whenever anything happens and whenever there's anything news and they need relevant information. That is evidence that we're winning.
If having an opportunity to tell the story
Right.
and make sure people understand what really happened, then by definition you have won.
Correct.
Or are winning.
Correct. And I could give you more, but we're probably running out of time.
Not ready to declare it won, though, are you?
No, no indeed, no indeed. Because when people line up outside my door and tell me to stop saying the flooding was caused by a man-made engineering, then I know we won.
Very quickly, aren't there some people telling you that, though, that we're ready to, aren't you hearing it from some people? We're ready to move on?
I'm hearing it from the people that don't want this investigation to happen. Those are the people who are saying that.
Any interest in running for political offices?
No,
And has anyone talked to you about that?
I get it. I get it all the time, and I take it as a vote of confidence. But no, I will not be running for office. I'm too busy doing the work I do.
Has this overall experience changed your life, and if so, in what way?
I work 24/7, 365. If you don't believe me, just ask my husband. But you can also ask my husband, is she enjoying her work? I would say, yes, I'm enjoying this very much. It is wonderful to be able to really make a difference. But I've learned that the very people that can stop you are the people that you trust. And it's really important to believe in what you're doing, and it's really important not to give up.
How's that tennis game? Probably not nearly as good
Probably
as
what keeps me sane.
Sandy Rosenthal with Levees.org. Thank you so much for being with us and for the good work you do.
You're very welcome.
For more information on Levees.org or to get a copy of the organization's DVD, The Katrina Myth, you can visit the organization's website. That's www.levees.org. And that is our program for tonight. We appreciate you and your support of our program, Greater New Orleans, and our station, LAE. We'll see you next time right here on LAE.